I'm Scott Hinkstrom, and I'm the director for the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today to the fourth of our seminars in this series of seminars that we've been putting on. We have two left. AJ DeRosa is speaking in a couple of weeks on connectivity with our millennials and Gen Zers. So it's kind of an age-based type presentation. And then our own Dean, Christine Thomas, will be wrapping up the program March 28th with kind of an overview of our whole issue about cultural diversity and inclusivity and the colloquium we have. I do want to mention that our seminar series is supported by a variety of players, the College of Natural Resources, the Rural Revitalization and Extension Act, the Kennedy Groney Foundation, the Stevens Foundation, and then the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife that brought this program to you. I do want to make mention of a program that is coming up on Tuesday, March 5th, and this was provided to us by the Native American Center, and it's a program that's going to be an afternoon program, or an evening program, 5 to 7:30, and of those of you who might be interested, this looks like a really fascinating program. With that, I do have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Mr. Jon Greendeer. Jon is one who I've known for a while. I've been here 4 years, and I think I met you maybe half a year out. I met him at a celebration of elk at the HoChunk National Headquarters, and it was a fascinating event. Jon was one of the speakers, one of the hosts there, and it gave me an opportunity to say, man, I need to involve this fellow in some of our programs and increasing our connectivity. So it's a pleasure to have Jon here. Jon has an associate's degree from the University of Wisconsin, Marathon County, and a bachelor's degree in political sciences from here at UW-StevensPoint. And in fact, last year he was recognized and was as one of our distinguished alumni at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. He has worked for the HoChunk Nation, well, all his life. He's been an executive administrative officer, a certified mediator, and from 2011 to 2015, he served the HoChunk people as their president of that HoChunk Nation. He currently is the executive director of heritage preservation for the HoChunk Nation. Jon lives in Stevens Point with his wife, Christine Munson. They have two daughters, Brittany and Rio, and a new grandchild, Scarlett, which is the center of his life, he says now. Jon is an avid outdoorsman, spends as much time as he can out enjoying the natural world. He's a woodworker, a musician, an AV drone operator, a cyclist, and a cultural educator. Today he's going to be talking with us about traditional ecological knowledge, co-management of our natural resources, and a wide variety of other subjects. It's my pleasure to introduce Jon, who will be speaking on our natural world and Indigenous perspective. Jon.
Aho. Anachakchi, Hichokoto Hade, they were Noitke, Hida Karaga, Nank, they Ojokanina. Ijankishna hini karagiwino. Eskege mashuska higare, mashuska, hanachekti, mashuska. Ah, gipianaga, hanakuni gipiaskekte. Ege hoji shana hitokodo harage, wadae karashida ge wanje. Eskege ho changara hiske, woshka, honiki dagikshane. Eske higuana, maikate hoitera, hao nakshna, hanachekti, Jago he hekshana hanainach guida. Eske hanachek jigi wainap wiwa haje. Good evening, everyone. How you doing? Did you guys get that? Your context clues of my name, Mashuska. Wasn't that amazing? I love hearing my name by a whole bunch of people. It's like, that's what they call me. So that's typically what they use where I'm from. I prefer to use my Indian name. That's the name that was given to me a long time ago because that's my identity, right? The other one probably has some tax warrants on it, you know, but it's Jon Greendeer for all the people that can pronounce it a little bit easier. But again, I mentioned that a little while ago, a friend of mine had asked me to come out and speak to the group here a little bit about our way of life, our connections. I don't want to say old knowledge, even though that's probably what's on the brochure and stuff like that, because I'm pretty young yet, you know, I'm 25. I know, I look like I'm 22. It kind of messes you up for your head. But no, I still consider myself very young. It seems to me like I'm in a job where like the more I learn, it's really seems like the more I don't know about what I'm doing. So I feel like I'm not qualified to talk about a lot of different things. But then I look around and realize that there's not a lot of wisdom out there being shared. And I had a chance to meet with Jennifer and Scott this afternoon, and I think you guys should have sat in on that conversation because there was some good stuff to be discussed there. And I told them I didn't come in with an agenda, but there are some things that I think are absolutely amazing, especially for the natural world. I started out here as a natural resource major. So I remember sitting in this very room realizing that this gig is for like really smart people. So I'm going to go off and get my poli-sci degree or something like that. No, my passion has always been early Western political theory, thought, Kant, Hobbes. I had these professors that taught me how to understand what they were saying. I couldn't understand it. I opened a book, but realizing, that natural resource management wasn't just about natural resources degree or the discipline. It was about communications, it was about public administration, it was about policy, it was about social connections. It was all these things that went along with that really drove the agenda for natural resources protection. So in other words, you can't have 400 scientists walk out of this building and think that you're going to do the natural world better than anyone else. So it allowed for connectivity between the disciplines. People were able to share resources and take a look at an issue and put it in front of them and say, this is how this is going to be resolved. And so I don't want to speak too far at the 10,000 feet level, because right now is a really good opportunity to talk a little bit about history. So, and have some engagement between the folks here. So when your professor walks in and says, today we're going to talk about history, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Go ahead. What is it? Huh? What? World War II. That's a good one. What else? History. Real families in Europe. Anything else? Immigration. Civil War. Ben Franklin, John Hancock, Declaration of Independence, everything that started when a white guy touched the ground. Failure. So, by the way, disclaimers, you're probably gonna get uncomfortable, but not for very long, because I'm pretty cool about that. But when it comes to this history, we often find ourselves discussing about when Jean Nicolet reached the shores of Green Bay, fired his 2 thundersticks as the denizens of the woods went running, scurrying off and praising him like he was a next god. And then we were talking about a little bit ago about oral tradition, about how that seems to get frustrated when we decide we're going to write things down, and how it changes the scheme. So we have, our HoChunk people have stories that date back thousands of years, and they come back today in different forms, just as if we all went to go see a movie that's out, and we find out that we have to tell somebody what that movie was about. There's probably going to be about 70 different versions of that movie being told. Which one of those are going to be right? 69 of them, right? It depends on how your interest, your life experiences, your knowledge, your preferences, your prejudices, everything goes into how you're going to describe a story that has been told. And so over time, the story changes a little bit, the context changes, and all of a sudden you're left with something that you want to embrace and you want to pass on as well. When somebody writes about something, it ends. The diversity of any type of story, any word that was used, any phrase is gone. Now you are locked into one version, which is the hallmark of Western education, right? Because when you open up your test, you don't have a lot of freedom. 1, 2, A, B, true, false, left, right. You've got to pick something, and that is the fact. In our culture that seems to be, struggling against, the pressures of Western world, and, everyone's working 2 jobs just to be broke, and our kids never go outside anymore, and all these other things that we're just miserable about, is the vestiges of what for us make up human life. So I'll use some case examples. In the HoChunk culture, we describe our way of life as woshka. Can everyone say woshka? Woshka. A lot of the new language learners will say that's our woshka, that's our culture. But everybody has woshka. Everybody in here does. And woshka is your culture, which is a little bit different from heritage, which is kind of the field that I work in. But your woshka is your culture. And your culture is defined by your passion or the things that you do every day. Not the crap you say at the podium when you're trying to get elected or doing something great. I mean the stuff that you do every day. I fly drones. That's pretty cool. I know the next question. Yeah, they're really cool. Yes, they fly high. No, you can't fly them. That's part of my passion every day. But as to HoChunk de woshka de hoit eda yakichka haje he hambokai de wocheki jeskege HoChunk de woshka hiske honigi dagi jeske. I practice my language each day. I don't have a teacher. I don't have recordings. But because I do, I can tell you a little bit about our way of life. Not a lot, but a little bit about our way of life. And this is how this is contained into a language that seems to morph in meaning once you translate it. So I'll give you some examples a little bit later. So the other thing that novelists tend to do, anthropologists, archaeologists, anyone with a magnifying glass looking at a culture or a way of life or civilization, is they tend to two-dimensionalize an entire existence of human beings. And so what that means is we are going to draw, since we weren't here before 1634, right? We're going to draw some conclusions on stuff. I had mentioned that there were over 400 mound structures, burial mound structures, from Portage County all the way down to Wood County. They're amazing structures, some cataloged, some known, some not known, some that are really cool, nobody knows. I'd love to tell, but I can't. And, but they speak of a history of a civilization. Just got off the phone recently with an 84-year-old person who's spent her whole life looking at marker trees. Anywhere from 250 years old down to 50-year-old elms that were manufactured a little bit different to tell a little bit of a story. Then we've got, this contingent of who I totally classify as this group of, seems like old white guy farmers that love arrowheads. They've got a whole classification of them. They just go out and they show up like the Antiques Roadshow every day at my office, and they're like, take a look at this, and it's amazing and it's great. I found this by a marker tree. It's next to an old village site, and the people there, they did this and they wore that and everything like that. And the reality is you drew your conclusions on the things that you found. It's just stuff. Some of the most respected archaeologists in the field, which I work with quite often, are often talking about, hey, I can tell you what they ate, I can tell you what they used, I can tell you what they did, but if you want to know about them, they're still here. Ask them. They're still human. And so this is one of the greatest elements of reaching out. And it's hard to do because we talked about, a little bit about oral tradition. Once you memorialize it somehow, you kind of lose it. You don't, and if you don't know the right version, and because of our generations of Western education, you don't want to tell the wrong story because an elder might tell you that you don't know what you're talking about, and therefore definitely cauterize any type of story that goes along with that. So we're at a day and age where this is happening at a hyper evolution. And so we find ourselves, even within our own community, struggling to find pieces or elements that we could share and pass on to our young folks. So we talk about this, another thing, provocative element that studies of our people do, because I always feel like we're under glass somewhere, somehow, is they tend to paint the picture of survival. Whenever you hear about Native Americans, pre-colonial times, they're like, the people survived during harsh winters by creating fires and using, you know, stones as beds and things like that. And they survived by eating this, or they survived by using this as medicine. And it's always like we're surviving. Yeah. We're living. That's what we did. That's how you live each day. And, you know, we're talking about this. And you know, we talk about our HoChunk Woshka, our way of life. You know, what does it take to live? What are your elements to live? What are they? Food, water, shelter, space, Wi-Fi, that kind of stuff. You know, like the power went out the other day. I was like, we're dying. You know, it's like, it doesn't work. You know, we can live without power, but without Wi-Fi, that's asking too much. But you know, they're relatively simple, right? Food, water, shelter. Not too bad, not too hard. So if this was our village, and I would consider this a pretty well-equipped, knowledgeable group to call a village, and we needed to eat tonight, what would we have for dinner? Go ahead. Let's go pre-colonial here. Pre-colonial. Hunt some deer, right? Deer, snowshoe wrap, I mean trap. So I love deer hunting. How are we gonna get that deer? You probably could. That'd be the first ones I go after. But we'd have to find some way to incapacitate those animals, and typically traps and knives and spears and bows and strings we are not able to make yet, you know. And we find ourselves, hey, this is going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of energy. And I can assure you that even if you get a deer, my guess is within a matter of hours, we're going to be hungry again. Now we're thirsty too. So we need to get some water. How do we bring water back to our village? Pre-colonial. What's the best way? What's that?
Animal skins.
Animal skins. We haven't got one yet, but go ahead. What else? A basket made from? Birch. You better move fast. Because someone's going to be walking back with an empty basket, you know. But you've got to know how to craft that, you know. For a lot of people, culture's still alive today. Not a problem at all, you know. Shelter, you know. We've got to bind trees, we've got to cut trees, or we're using deadfall. So we're starting to make a structure that's going to house a village. In this time of year, is going to be a challenge. I'm not sure how this is going to work out. I can tell you we're probably not going to eat tonight. We're probably all going to have to walk to the river for a drink. And we're probably going to sleep under the stars, at least for the first night. But you're starting to realize that these simple things of food, water, and shelter are not that simple without the tools to get the resources that we need to survive. Even more so, not only do we not have the tools, but we also don't have the wisdom that goes along with making sure that birch basket can hold water, or that you know how to skin the animal so that you don't have all the water seeping out of the wrong end, you know, because there is a way to follow that. Or that you can make ties and rope from basswood and cedar and bind the trees as well, and hollow out different portions of deadfall trees in order to carry water, to carry food or items, how to dig. And so how long would it take us to do that? To learn how to live like that once again? Hour, a day, a month, a year? Probably more, probably a lifetime. Probably more than a lifetime. Probably generations. Generations that have gone on and on and on and perfected the life that we have today. So that when we come out and we're driving around and we're PO'd because it's minus 26 and our car isn't moving at all, there were people that were able to survive in there with some, you know, difficulty, but they were able to survive again, just live. So we have a way of life that, you know, not only is still very evident today that we are struggling to perpetuate, but also has a value in terms of the field of work and studies that you guys go into each day. So, you know, understanding that, you know, we have scientified indicator species into a a basic science of biology of understanding. We have had traditional wisdom that has come through that taught us where certain medicines come from. I was just telling them, it was like, remember that meme that goes around, like, who was the first person to discover that you could drink milk from a cow? That's pretty weird and kind of messed up, but it's pretty relatively accepted. But how did our people come to understand that certain plant species that are indistinguishable from others carried certain medicines that would allow us to survive, to get through an ailment, to prevent sickness and disease? How did they know that? How did they come to even begin to know that? Because you can't just grab it and eat it, but there are certain ways of preparing that. In our stories, in our traditions, we had certain elements, animals, beings, spirits, people, ancestors that came and taught us those traditional. And the funny thing is working where I work, I should tell you guys what I do as soon as I figure it out. But I am a preservationist, cultural resources manager. I try to preserve the things that are dying, that we're losing. So not the most obvious things, because when you hear about American Indian culture, the first thing that comes to mind is what? Come on, don't be afraid. Headdresses, what else? Teepees. Got one? Say it, I'll say it for you. Casinos, I'm just kidding. But it's one of those things that the minute is the stigma, because of our Western education, the first thing you think of are these class things, and you don't often think about the things that you don't see, because obviously you don't see those. The same thing for HoChunk. How many people have heard of the HoChunk Nation before? Now, how many of you, be honest, think of casinos when you hear of the HoChunk Nation? Because I'm going to tell my marketing team, because you better be raising your hand. We pay them a lot of money, But when in terms of an indigenous tribe, who has a hybrid government, one that is a business, one that is a government, and one that is a people. That's the part where I'm at, where the people are. How do we? Because none of this crap matters to me. But I mean, like, how do we maintain who we once were? How do we maintain our identity? How and why? Why? More important, when I go to work, I'm not thinking about what I'm doing that day or where I'm going. I'm always thinking about why I'm going there, why I'm doing what I'm going to do. And this is important because at the end of the day, I want people to feel connection with who they are. I don't want you to be okay with being HoChunk. I want you to be proud of who you are. It doesn't matter what you are, but I want you to feel that connection. Because why? Because you're not going to be depressed, all the time. You're going to be successful. You're going to work a little bit harder. You're going to want to share that identity with others. And this connection that we have is we're so fortunate. I'm one of 8,000 people in a state of 6 million in a country of a zillion. And I'm literally, I think mathematically, which I'm horrible at, I'm like 1 in a million. So every millionth person you're gonna walk into is a member of my tribe. Is that cool or what? You guys are so lucky. so anyway, I'll just give me $1. But in terms of making sure that we build not only connection to their culture, but also do that with the idea that they are strengthening their identity. A long time ago, they say Hagud Asia, that's what they'll say, or Seed Asia, they say. A very long time ago, there was this rivalry that took place between beings that could never identify with anyone in the room. We had powerful beings that ruled over all of our waters, still do. Everything, every bit of water is connected. Whether you're on the Wisconsin River here or you're at the Dakota Access Pipeline, every piece of water is connected. And because of that, our Wakchehi, or our water spirits, looked over that. They rivaled quite a bit with the thunder beings who are set to return this time of year. And when they come back, there's usually some problems between those two. because the ice is starting to come off, and here comes the protection is coming off from the water, and here comes the thunders to take over. And so this rivalry began over in Lake Winnebago, as one of our stories tells. And one of the water spirits was convinced that this war should take place, while being told they should never fight this war between the thunders. Yet he took off and traveled through our land all the way to a town that we call Devil's Lake, just north of Baraboo, and set up to battle. They battled for time unending, seemingly. The thunders came in, shooting lightning bolts down into the water, picking up large rocks, dropping them onto the water spirits, while the water spirits were shooting incredible jets, pushing the thunders back. And they went back for days. They destroyed a lot of the landscape there, changed it significantly. Sooner or later, the thunders were able to fight down the water spirits and bring that one back. And that land, because of where it was, became known as De HoChunk. De is the word for lake in HoChunk. That's why we have De Jope. There's 4 lakes. De HoChunk is the word for sacred or holy. So this was the place that we had gone to ever since that battle took place, to bring our offerings both to the thunders and to the water spirits. Because of that, we were given medicines, some that we could only find at night there. As evidence that this battle took place were large geological caches on top of the South Mound there that could never have been brought over at that time by human hands. The land just south of there was a land that was vast, full of bison, full of wildlife, all those things that we needed to survive. And yet, colonization came, and eventually we were moved west of the Mississippi in a lot of different places, or fought, battled, found ourselves in the woods. We lost a lot of things that normally would be life-sustaining, like our agricultural fields or our hunting sites. My favorite tree stand, those types of things, fishing holes. We lost everything at that point, yet that land we still remained connected to. Eventually, the federal government took it over during the war to create ammunitions and propulsions and explosive items. And so the land was rich with buildings and dropping, contamination, trinitrotoluene, every contaminant in the book on that area. And they used it to build one of the most successful ammunition plants. And some of you may be more familiar with others. And this took on a new, because even the white people got moved off that land. That's a joke. Anyway, but they left cemeteries there. They left, we had burials there. There were stories of our old ones who had fasted in that area just for that, to have that return come back and bring value. On the hill lies a number of mounds and some effigies, some remains, some inadvertent discoveries. One of the only caches that we have of what we call blue pipestone. As a matter of fact, if it's found anywhere in this region of the United States, it came from there. And we found those trade items in archaeological sites out as far as Mankato to northern Michigan, UP, all the way down to St. Louis. So there was a trade item that only exists on that site. In 1998, the United States federal government decided to dispose of this 8,000 some acres and start parsing out the land to USDA and other interested parties who had petitioned for the disposition of federal properties, and there lie a claim from the HoChunk Nation to say this is ours. No one else should get that. That's ours. And eventually, the only thing left was a parcel for 1,553 acres, to which the Wisconsin State DNR had petitioned for the entire amount. We came in last minute with a petition for that entire property. The DNR actually knew that this property was who the proper title was, and drafted up an agreement that would state that we would take the 760 acres of that property, split it up in half, show the federal government, and everyone's going to hug and walk away in the sunset. Our traditional leaders were not so thrilled about that. That seemed anything that comes that easy is not a good deal. How do we know? Come on. So begins a long battle. 20 years had passed, and we had gone through so many different lawyers, so many different law firms, so many different communications, scientists, archaeologists, you know, every professional services. We got millions in the game. And in January of 2012, as serving as president, I received a letter from the federal government that says, we will not support the HoChunk Nation's claim for this property because of the contamination levels of this, this parcel that you're looking at. The cost is too high, it's beyond the threshold, and remediation is an impossibility. And so at that point, the HoChunk Nation had to reach out to organizations that were outside their wheelhouse. You know, we were obviously worked a lot with government, Sauk County, but again, if the HoChunk Nation were to secure 760 acres of that property, we owe taxes on 760 acres of property. So we want this land in trust under our ownership and our jurisdiction. That would be an act of Congress. Not figuratively, but literally. It would take an act of Congress to make that happen. We fought 22 trips later after this element and having the support and looking at the remediation plans and the risk assessment that's involved with delivering a parcel of land that has alleged contamination on it to a group that had long-term vision of having a public area which put things at, you know, high risk to compare it to the HoChunk Nation's plan. What is your plan? We're going to let our earth take it back. This belongs to our grandmother. It doesn't even belong to us. But we're going to let her. Today, I mean, we finally got noticed, and there was a lot of weird stuff. I'm a product of the 90s as well, so I'm like Schoolhouse Rock. Taught me everything I needed to know about government. It's just killed me that they're wrong. That's not how government works. When you go in the Dirksen or the Hart building or any of the Senate buildings, you're not going to see people like you. They don't exist. You are going to see branded, very high-paid executives that get a chance to sit with people. Oh, you'll get the tourists. Oh, you'll get the T-shirts. But if you want a seat at the table, you have got to be a part of that machine. And that was one of the most difficult and most depressing things I've seen in our United States government. And a government that runs so crappy, by the way. You know, I take pride in, you know, being a study of politics to say that the HoChunk Nation is the most sophisticated by any stretch of any governance that I've ever seen. I spent 4 years. We are a $500 million generating industry, and I've never had to see a piece of paper walk into my office other than anything I need to sign a hard copy. Everything was immediately digitized, OCR text recognition, and digitally signed. You know, we have a multi-jurisdictional area. I'm very proud of, and this was one of the motivators for us to be the proper caretakers, the original caretakers of this land. Eventually, one of our state senators now calls me up and says, the land is now yours. And not only is it yours, you don't owe any taxes on it because it is now under federal jurisdiction. We passed the defense bill, and that included in that, all 1,553 acres are titled to the HoChunk Nation. And so this was the most amazing moment, I think, that really spoke hard of the partnerships and more of the reasons, those medicines that exist there. You know, for a guy who had lost all humanity in governance, remember the government that you could go to with emotion, with facts? Remember the government you could bring science to and lay it in front of them and they'd make a decision based on that? Remember that one? Well, it showed up just once in my lifetime. And we brought this out, and everything we had to do in order to get this is we had to know their job more than they knew their own. And we had to know, I was telling these guys, my office wasn't running our nation. We were busy Google searching every person I was going to meet that day. I wanted to know where they coached volleyball. I wanted to know everything about them, you know. And we had to know their jobs better in order for us to even move the needle in terms of moving successful policy. Today, this 1,553 acres remains quiet. The roads, most of the roads, are almost unidentifiable. The earth has taken them back. The building structures have been removed. The surface level contaminants are zero. We test them, so we have no reason to lie about that. And the most important portion, which I kind of take a little credit for, was in the actual defense bill was a provision that says the polluter pays. So this offset any obligation from the Department of Interior, GSA, Department of Army, anyone to place any of that financial burden on the new old owners of that property, which means that anything that rises above the contamination level set by the EPA is to be paid for by the federal government in perpetuity. So this land is back where it needs to be. And so we had a reclamation ceremony there, and I still sit on the management board of that. We have nesting birds there that we can't even disclose the species because birders will be out there. I guess they're kind of weird people. Like they'll like trip over their own grandparents to get to somewhere, you know. But we also have successful partnerships with the Sauk Prairie Alliance, with the county boards, and we have completely turned that back over to our grandmother, our earth, and to me, these represent some of the things that you'll encounter in this field that don't fit in a perfect box, or that don't fit in a PowerPoint, or that don't fit in a test. That somewhere along the line, your value is going to be really measured by how well you handle difficulty, how much you handle uncertainty, and I wish I could say it was because of the quality education I received from this and other institutions, or from the wisdom that someone has given me, or the guidance of our professional legal counsel. But if I were, that would snub the credit of the people that really, really gave me the inspiration behind working on this big cause together to receive our land back. And that was those people that were able to continue telling those stories about the thunders, about the water spirits, about the medicines, about the burials, the mounds, the effigies, the plants, and give me the vision of those bison there, because I want my grandchild to see those bison there running like they used to. And it's a total possibility. It's there. And if anyone thinks that that's really hard, you should have saw how hard it was to get it back, and explain through logic that, hey, dude, if you steal my minivan and you break it up, it's still my minivan. Don't give it to everybody else, and that's basically what they've done. So I've had the chance to have front row seats at a lot of this. As Scott had mentioned, these partnerships that evolve, and I mean partnerships, not we showed up and had a social together, but I mean like real invested partnerships where you're at the table making decisions together, like with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, with all these other interest groups that are out there saying, we have a greater interest in this, in restoring our natural world to the best of our abilities. Because once you do, you bring that value back. And I had mentioned before, when I had an opportunity to speak for Scott before, we had talked about the sturgeon. That's kind of big news right now, right? Social media, there's like this 15,000-pound sturgeon that someone smoked, or whatever. They're all excited about it. And one of the things about this time of year is when they're coming up the rivers, and you used to be able to sit here on this very earth, get rid of the buildings and everything, sit here and listen to the Menominee and their Sturgeon Ceremony. That was one of their largest ceremonies 100 years ago. How did it end? Well, we dammed the damn river. It ended. The value of what they had was no longer, because no longer could the sturgeon swim up the river. And they waited for that. They had songs, they sang all night, certain foods that they would do, stories that went along with that. They had outfits, they had dances, they had everything that they could do. And they lost that for nearly half a century. And the people that knew how to do that ceremony weren't around when the DNR went up 10 years ago to lift sturgeon up in a vehicle and bring them above the dam and drop a few off. But they've had to replicate whatever they knew. In that time, the value that went along with that, I don't believe was transcended down to the youth. It became something of a memory that they're trying to replicate. But we lost that. It's happened a lot of times. It's happened with the Pyramid Lake Paiute on the Truckee River with their kiwi fish. They've built their whole life around it. If you've ever gone to the reservation, you can't swing a dead cat without seeing a kiwi fish hanging up somewhere or a story, but they lost that because of what man has done to nature. But the interesting thing is that nature has a tail whip to it. And we know this, right? It'll do what she wants to do, you know, and we've learned that in Lake Delton when they decided, I'm tired of being dammed up. Let's blow this thing, you know, and things changed. All of a sudden, some of the old creek beds surfaced up there that were never there. And so these things happen for a reason. But the main thing is making sure that, you know, you understand that as you're going forward in terms of, now let's get more to the administrative political side, you're going to be at the decision-making table. I don't think there's going to be anyone here that's going to be and grunting their way through their discipline. I think you're here for a reason, that you are a leader in natural resource management or are a leader in your communities. And one of the things you're going to understand that I wish if I could go back in time is to make sure that there are inclusive decisions made at that table, that the decisions that are there reflect people that were here prior. Because I can tell you, working with the state government, the county government, municipal government, and the federal government, that retrofitting policy where it should have been is a lot harder than just including that in at the start. And for those of you who are like me, naturally lazy and don't want to do a lot of work, the best thing to do is to get everyone at the table, the decision-making table, not the social media table, but the one where you're actually going to do something, roll sleeves up, and making sure that people are there providing their input, insight, and perhaps even their stories to bring some sort of human quality to policy building. And this is where it comes down to. It's not a conservative, liberal thing. It's nothing like that. And you know, I think right now, you know, there's so much polarity generated by our social media. You know, I can't even, you know, at least I still have some friends that are on the opposite political spectrum with me. Hey, you know, your guy's a jerk, but do you want to go for a bike ride? Yeah, let's do it, you know. So, but I think, you know, nowadays, you can't have any issue, especially in our natural world, without becoming polarized by some sort of political party influence. So I think the desires and wishes of the natural resource world, wildlife management, law enforcement, are relatively simple. They're not complex, despite the wealth of science behind it driving their decision making. It's not that, there's not even an argument, you know, to the fact that this impacts this, which will impact that. You know, the fact that, you know, there's no one left in our tribe that is tanning deer hides means that there's no one left making moccasins. Means that there's no one left putting beadworks on moccasins. Means that there's no one left that understands the patterns that you would take or the historical colors that you would use. Means that it's going to cost you about $700 to make a real pair of moccasins now. Which means that moccasins are now made for the museum shelf and not to be worn anymore. We have just plasticized an entire way of life. Just simply by one little chain reaction. And it happens even within our own structure. So it's not anything that I can go out condemning the world of the Western world for changing anything. It's just a matter of how do you respond to that? How do you handle that? And so part of why I'm glad to be here is because I get a chance to fill that spot just a little bit. I don't know what you're going to walk out here with today. But my jokes aren't that funny. I think a lot of it's probably just because you're in a crowd setting and you're being nice. But the points that I make aren't, and they're very serious. And it's what keeps me to work. Part of what I do is most often, if there are mounds, inadvertent discoveries, tools, arrowheads, you know, a lot of that comes to me. As a matter of fact, this spring we always bulk up and get ready because, you know, the ice jams are going to come. They're going to open up surface level artifacts, materials. We got to go out there and make sure it wasn't a cow versus a human, you know, those types of things. But then at the other side, we have to make sure that, you know, when we do, you know, work on that portion of that, that we also work with the local community so that they understand that the history that they have here isn't a matter of, hey, look, you just dropped a house on top of our village type of thing, but here, this is from the people that you learn about, all the way through Moses Creek, all the way down to the river, all the way down through, McDill Park, and, we found some pretty cool, projectile points, and then there's mound systems and hand tools and other mounds, and, and then you start looking at, okay, what do they do? How do they live? It was a simple life: food, water, shelter. And so today we have quite an amazing machine here. A lot of interest groups, a lot of people that have a desire to learn a lot more. And so with that, there's more. I really could go on a lot. I'm very proud of the people I work with. I'm the guy, I'm not the guy that knows, but I'm usually the guy that can get you to the people that know. And so, so I have the privilege of working with a lot of inquisitive people and working with people that are knowledgeable and creating learning environments. So, any questions? I'm sure glad I told you everything you guys needed to know. No, so, I don't want to, try to sour or demystify, I often is the case. I've been around people that have watched Dances with Wolves too many times, and I've got to kind of gear them back a little bit and say, no, we didn't. There's no hawk flying around me or anything like that. But the reality is that we are quite sophisticated and quite articulate. So you had a question?
I've got a weird question.
Yeah.
So, I don't really know how to ask it, but basically, do speakers of the HoChunk language now speak it with like a different accent than it was spoken with historically?
Absolutely. And if you're a study of mine at the origin of Old English, we speak a different language and a lot different language than I couldn't even understand it. It was written in English. But we were a generation that was brought up being told that our language is going to die, that it is going extinct, that I will be alive when the last person dies that can speak our language. After a generation, after a lifetime of hearing that, it's no different than telling a student that everything that they're doing is dumb. Telling a worker that everything they're doing, it doesn't matter. And so the stigma that we've had growing up was really hard for this generation, my generation and younger, to overcome, to come back and reclaim the language. Our language isn't going to die. So we can't come to work thinking that was the case. We need to come to work thinking that it's going to survive. It is not going to be the language of our grandfathers and grandmothers. We have to accept that. They have to accept that. But it is going to continue. It may even go to sleep for a little bit. But we have, I believe, people. I don't have the honor to put myself in that group. But generations ago, people had the foresight to start documenting and putting things into learning context. Kids learn differently these days. So going out there and saying, oh, go see that old man on the hill, go bring him some groceries and tobacco and he'll teach you like bull, kids are like, if you can't teach me in 35 seconds in a meme or video, good luck, if it's not on the test. And so I am, I'm not a fluent speaker by any stretch of the means. I am the only speaker that has learned exclusively from a book. I've never had a speaker. I've never had a class, and I've never, other than just my own drive to learn a little bit more about our way, thinking language was the way to do it. Really, it just messed me up. But there has to be a desire. So really, language learning is much about marketing. It is about teaching techniques and things like that. So yes, we're not going to lose it. It is different. Can we understand? We certainly can. We can understand Otos, our relations, Pankas, our relations. So we are a Suian group. There are some Sioux words that we can describe, and we sit there and fight who came from who, So, yeah.
With the Devil's territory, now that you're the HoChunk Nation now officially has ownership, you said that there's some species of birds that you can't say because birders will come. Is it strictly a reservation-only land, or so it's not really open to the public?
So just trust land is you should be able to walk across trust land and fee land, the two opposing types of land that we deal with, and not even know for the most part. So you're not going to, we didn't build a wall. Make you guys pay for it. No, no. It's relatively open. As a matter of fact, we do lease the land out to a rocket company. We're going to be partnering with canine trainers out there. So we're going to do police dog, emergency dog training. So, you know, we're hoping to have multi-use, recreational use, light use, but certainly it's not. You know, don't go running out there. Don't be saying I said either. But we are seeing some amazing science and biology taking place with what happens to a land that, you know, people thought was just going to go feral, and you know, and that was it. So,
Has your success with acquiring this land had other tribes come to you and like refer to you guys, and how you did that act, especially with like the Menominee people and the Back 45?
Right. So, you know, I'm supposed to be humble, but in terms of putting land into trust, just a quick process. If you go out and buy a piece of property, let's say you go out and buy 40 acres, you owe taxes on that 40 acres, and you're going to be paying every year. You're subject to the state, county, municipal laws. If you're a tribe and purchase that land, same thing. There's nothing different. But we can apply for federal trust. And the federal trust is basically a long process, anywhere from 2 to 10 years, or even longer, unless Congress actually indoctrinates that as trust land. But the process is really to do your EIS and have a lot of these expensive, useless things done because you just want to preserve it. But under putting in trust, you have your parameters of government services, economic development, gaming, obviously, agriculture, and forestry. So, you know, depending on what classification you're going to be putting those under, you can use it for housing, for government services, but they're going to kind of scrutinize that property. Once they accept that, and now this is where the counties and the tribe go nuts, because they're going to be losing $26,000 of tax revenue on that land. And it's not like they can afford to. You know how counties are; they're broke as a joke, and they're not going to know how to fill that hole. So that's when they say, "Hey, John, you know what? We can't accept you putting that land into. We're going to be opposing it." And I'll be like, "Well, Wally," because they're always named Wally. But anyway, Wally, let's sit down. You know, I can't pay your taxes for you, because if I do, my people will kill me. So I can tell you that right now, you're going to need new emergency vehicles, and you're going to be providing services on this property. What do you say we help you out with a fire engine every 5 years? You know, and we do what's called a PILT, or a pilot agreement, a payment in lieu of taxes. And so these are often the cases in terms of land in the trust. And Wally says, "Hey, I went to my board, and it was unanimous. All 2 of us agreed." You know, we'll go ahead and not oppose that land. And when you have a partnership like that, the land moves into trust a little bit faster. Once it secures trust, state law does not apply for it to it. But you can't go running to tribal land and like, you know, you can't do that. There's a lot of public law 280 laws that apply for that. But what it does mean that if there are laws that the nation has made on those particular lands, the state has to give deference to those laws first. So you just can't do that. So that's part of and HoChunk is really built like that. We don't have a reservation. And the story is amazing of how the disposition works. So sometimes people go, well, HoChunk's all over the place. You know, they're so lucky they got 6 gaming establishments, they got blah, blah, blah. You know, Menominee has been there their whole lives. That's their community. They grew up with that. They got their family structure, they got their kinship, they've got their language, they've got everything right there. Who's the rich ones? At least in my book. You know, you want money? Pfft, shit, I got money. I ain't gonna be, I won't have money, doesn't matter to me. But what has happened to an entire culture, a tribe, over the course of disenfranchisement? We've had to evolve our governance, we've had to involve our representation, and you know, but at the same time, that did not come at its own cost. So when we do secure our trust land and build our land bases, it isn't to expand gaming, it isn't to, you know, put nefarious businesses on there, it's to help our communities. And I can tell you right now, our communities, and for those of you who want to walk away with real random Cliff Clavin knowledge, you know, the HoChunk Nation employs about 3,400 people. 2,100 of those individuals work on the gaming floor. So we're at least 2/3 gaming, 1/3 non-gaming. So we've got government workers, program services workers, emergency workers, health workers. We've got all kinds of folks. On the non-gaming side, 50% of those 1,300 workers are non-tribal. 85% of every casino worker that we have is non-tribal. And I would love to see anyone's insurance benefits, where their parents work, where they work, and lay them up next to any of our employees. We've stumbled, we've misstepped, but I can assure you that I hang my hat on our nation treating all of its employees like family, taking care of them. Sometimes you don't want to be treated like family because they're pretty mean sometimes too, but still, I'm very proud of this. And so that's part of the composition of the nation. And so in order for us to succeed as a nation, we can't succeed as a tribe, we have to succeed as communities, working together, partnerships, because I'll tell you what, the resources for addressing opioid use or addressing environmental issues or addressing, you know, governance, finance, any type of thing going through, health, diabetes, isn't getting larger, it's getting smaller. And it's forcing us to work together. But in that time, we've developed partnerships. What we've always been over thousands of years is very resourceful. And so we've looked upon our partners, our homes, our households that have been mixed for decades and decades. And so, you know, on that note, we're proud of who we are, where we were, how we are now, and where we're going. So, jeske hanachek ti hinagigi we eske ge jagu hi hekshne na hanainach guida eske HoChunk da woshka hiske hanach guyanaga jeske ge jeda pianaga eske ge hanachek ti ge wa inap we wahaje. Thank you.